everybody. Welcome back to the Rote Reviews. I'm Baz Collins here with my co-host,
Mr. Vance Bastion at your service.
Voice actor extraordinaire. Anyways, we're doing the queer film Akron. Of course, Akron. How am I supposed to say it, honey?
You right second time.
Akron.
As in Akron, Ohio.
Yes, as in Akron, Ohio, where it takes place. It is a pseudo-romance story. It deals with romantic themes, but there is, and I learned a new word. Let me make sure I say it correctly. Zemblanity. It's the antonym for serendipity, which I think is kind of appropriate for this film because there is a serendipitous nature to our love interests meeting each other for a second time. And yet there's a semblavity element of bad luck and misfortune wrapped up in it. So I thought it was kind of interesting to have those two words in the same film that can be described for the same film. But let me give you a quick rundown of what the synopsis is. The synopsis is when David and Christopher, college freshmen, meet at a football game and fall in love, a tragic event from their past threatens to tear them apart. So that's the general gist of it. But Vance, why don't you start to tell us what you thought about the film?
All right. And this is spoiling nothing because it's the first 5 minutes. But in the first 5 minutes, we see two mothers, one with a single child, one with two children, shopping in a grocery store.
And the other mother is pregnant too.
And and the mother with two is also pregnant with a third. And as they're leaving the grocery store, the mother with one accidentally hits a child with her car. So tragedy in the first 5 minutes. We then leap to 15, 16 years later, and the children who had survived that tragedy are now in college. And they're, of course, the ones who meet at the football game. Should not be a surprise. Because their names are used in both the flashback and in the modern time, you figure out, as a viewer, you figure out real fast exactly who those boys are and what their tie is to each other. But it's when Christopher, the child of the mother who was driving, figures it out that your heart starts to break.
Because you see what's coming.
Because you see
even
what's
before
coming.
The characters do.
Exactly. And unfortunately, he figures it out right as he's about to take Benny to go meet his mother.
Right.
So, yes, there's a romance. And yes, the boys are out at the beginning. There's no coming out story necessary. The families both support these kids. It's exactly what I want to see in a story. But the movie's not about them. The movie is about the mothers and the fact that this tragedy has shaped their lives for almost 20 years.
Yes. You're not cheated in the romance between Benny and Christopher.
Not at all.
You get to see the evolution of their relationship. You get to see them hanging out with friends. You get to see them partying a little bit. You get to see them actually sexualize their relationship. And it's some of the most intimate photography I think I've seen, as far as they took their time with it. And I will say one thing about Akron is that this is how American independent queer films should be done and produced. I think, because it's hard to get, we've talked to Brent Hardinger, who's a screenwriter and novelist extraordinaire. And one of the things he says is that it is easier to get queer films produced in other countries, other Western countries, because a lot of them are subsidized by government,
funding for the arts.
Yeah, funding for the arts. Whereas in America, you really have to hunt for the funding. There's not much. I mean, the National Endowment of the Arts doesn't really have the capacity because it's not given the budget, especially in recent decades,
right,
that it used to have to fund those things. And so it's really become very difficult to produce films like Akron at that level as an indie film. It seems to be getting better. I mean, there are some indie films that do have that. GBF is one I can think of off the top of my head that had high quality production standards. So, there are a few out there, but there are many more of them, which we would hope to cover in this YouTube channel, of the queer themed movies that are done abroad that I think have a much easier path to having a quality production than we do here. So Akron gets a big shout out for doing it right. I don't know what their budget was, but whatever it was, they were very, very smart in how they applied it. So kudos to the production team, because I think that really showed in this film. It's not where, you didn't have, sometimes, the budgets tend to lean you one way or the other. You get really good quality picture, but the sound is crappy, or you get sound really good, but the picture is kind of whopper jawed. So in this film, I will say the one thing I loved about this movie is that you had the feeling that it was more than just a standard indie film.
Yep.
So for that, I will give them a shout out. I think Sasha King and Brian O'Donnell, the co-directors of this, did a remarkable job in keeping whatever budget they had applied really smart. And they knew exactly, where their money needed to go. And it was well spent. I think this film is a prime example of how you can do an indie film done right, where you don't have, something missing, something you had to overly compromise for. I'm sure they had to make compromises, but because that happens with every film production. But I wanted to give that quick shout out to the production team, because that was the first thing when the very first time I watched this movie, and I've watched it many times, that I really was impressed by. I almost could say, wow, this might have been done by a studio, like, how the studios have subsidiary companies, it felt like one of those. So on that level, you're not going to go wrong. But it is a pseudo dark tale, and as you say, it is about the mothers, and it's very interesting how it was written so that the audience could get ahead of the story.
Right, very much so.
Yeah,
and
it was so. Oh, go ahead.
I'll say the only other thing I'll leave you with is that it does end on a note that makes you feel like life's going to be okay.
Yes, there is a resolution to the darkness in the movie, but it is an intriguing film in that it's kind of the Hitchcock way of doing filming, where the camera gives you more information than the characters have. So you're watching a slow moving train wreck in action.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of, it creates the tension in the viewer, knowing what's coming, and you're just like, oh, and I think that's to its credit. I think they handled that really well, because it could have been kind of mishandled.
So you always make me go first, so you do your ratings first.
All right. So, and I want to do a small clarification. When we get to directors in our categories, we include DP work. So the cinematography, the director of photography is under the directing, just so everybody knows that when we say directing, we're also including the cinematographer in that. Overall production, I gave it a 4. I really like the film. I do recommend it to people. And so I will say that that's probably, for sound, I definitely a 5, because that's usually one of the things I notice in films when it's not handled properly. And I was rather impressed that the sound quality was actually very, very good. Especially for a queer indie. Art direction, I gave it a 4, and it's not really, I can't knock anything about it, but it just, I don't know, there is something slightly shown that, and I can't put my finger on it, but I know it's an indie film. There's just a slight quality to it that it's like, if they only had a little bit more money, it might have completely fooled you into thinking it was a big studio production. So I'll give it a 4. The art direction and costuming, I think, were well done. Nobody was miscast. I think everybody did their jobs. Even John, the boyfriend to Benny's GBF, our best friend BFF, he acquitted himself okay. He has very few scenes, but he did his job. So if a cashier, in the beginning, she did her job. So even the smaller parts, everybody felt like they were part of the same world. Nobody took you out of it. So there's that. Casting, I thought casting was well done. Did I just say that? Oh, okay. So directing, I definitely give it a 5. I think the 2 directors did it really well, and I did like the cinematography. I thought the palette color choices for the colorization of the film was rather interesting, because it had, and this is where I'm going to get kind of slightly ethereal, but the color palette reminded me of autumn, which is the death of life, and because summer's all bright and green, and
See,
the
for me,
palette
that was a negative, because the majority of the story focused on spring break.
Yes, it does, but you still had this wintry kind of muted color palette, which to me was a good symbol of how the relationship was on troubled waters. I really liked that element of it, so that's what I'll say for the directing. The queer themes presented, I thought 5. I think that they did a good job with it. Everybody was okay with it. And here's the thing I will say, I believed this Latino family a bit more than I did when we reviewed Love, Victor, because and part of it was in the way it was written, in that when you had the husband and wife, when you had the parents, David and Leonora, having discussion about Benny wanting to go to a party and he wants to stay out, that conversation was real. I really believed this couple had a past, because, they went through the whole thing. And then, they said, well, he's going to do what he's going to do. Let him do it, because if we tell him not to, he's still going to go do it. And then she turns to her husband and says the best line, one of the best lines, well, what about, Becca, the daughter? And he goes, oh, hell no. That's a Latino father.
Yeah, the double standard. Boy can do it, girl can't.
Yeah, that's right. That's Latino right there, man. She will be in a convent until she's married. How she gets married, I have no idea. If she's stuck in a convent. But that's Latino male thinking for you. But, I really liked it. I also liked when the realization occurs of what the tragedy is in the film. They have another meeting where the two of them talk it through, and realize Benny's happiness is in the balance. And that to me was an important moment in the film, because you really got a sense that this is a working marriage, So for queer themes, I give it a 5. My overall is a 4.
All right. So I gave production a 4. It didn't get in the way of anything. I enjoyed it. Script, screenplay, also a 4. It never knocked me out. I thought it was maybe a little slow moving, but that's kind of the nature of drama and tragedy.
There was some stilted moments where you could have tightened it up a bit.
Right. Sound, lighting, score, I actually gave a 3.5 for what we just discussed. I felt that, and I know what you were saying about the symbolism, but it still felt like a really weird spring to me. I'm like, global warming is a thing in this movie, and this was 2015. Yeah. Art direction, costuming, also 3.5. You could tell there were some budget things going on, but mostly it worked. Casting, 4. I thought everybody was well cast. Directing, 4. It didn't quite knock my socks off, and the director / cinematographer made one choice that threw me out completely.
Oh, really? What was that?
When the boys are on their road trip and they decided to flip to the little videos that these boys took on their 2014 iPhones, as opposed to just filming the boys filming each other. That flip in style just knocked me out.
Yeah, no,
100%.
I can see how I was okay with it. I mean, they're on their phones, that's what they're showing, but
I know, but
there have been other ways people have done it to better effect. So I agree with you.
right. And it looked like they just took the phone clips, because all of a sudden there was like these big black letter boxes on either side of the screen where the little phone strip was in the middle. I'm like, no. Other than that, 4, like I said, otherwise the directors really pulled the story out. So queer themes are presented. I only gave it a 4 because some of the stuff you discussed is family themes for sure. But in terms of the queer themes and their relationship, I loved it. I loved the fact that the world accepted them and it wasn't an issue, but it wasn't about them. So 4, it's there. It wasn't the highlight.
Well, the family has to contend with it. Still, even if they accept it, there was a resolution that had to be drawn because of the dark element between Christopher and Benny.
Sure. But in the conversation that the father has with the mother that you just referenced, it could have been a girlfriend and the same exact conversation could have happened. It had nothing to do with them both being boys. That conversation had nothing to do with their genders. So overall, I give it a 4. I would watch it again. Mm-hmm. It was very well done. A little on the tragedy side for my personal tastes. I wouldn't rush back to watch it again, but I absolutely recommend people see it at least once.
Yeah. All right. So there you have it. I will include the Rotten Tomatoes and the IMDb scores along with our scores. And so you have a well-rounded picture of what everybody's saying about it. And we will put those up on our screen here.
I'm like, where's those fingers going?
I don't know which way it's going. Anyways, I'll put it up. It'll go somewhere up here.
Yeah, all right.
And so next week, we are going to lighten things up. We're going to do something that's both musical, big gay time, musical and funny. And it is the movie Connie and Carla with the indomitable Nia Vardalos and Toni Collette as our divas. And so we will get into the whole gay boys and their divas kind of thing with this one. So looking forward to that. It's definitely a fun film. I think you'll enjoy what we have to say about it. And so until next week, this is S.A. Baz Collins and
Vance Bastion.
Remember to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about